Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, the new administration in Washington, D.C. continues to fill key government department heads with anti-cannabis leaders, while Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is confirmed as the head of Health and Human Services. And Republicans introduced legislation that would deny the industry the right to write off regular business deductions, 280E, even if cannabis gets rescheduled to 3. But even that seems like ancient history now. On the state scene, a number of governors in already legal states want to increase taxes on the industry in Maine, Michigan, Ohio, and in Maryland. And there was one feel-good story out of Washington, D.C. Longtime teacher Marc Fogel, who was jailed in Russia for cannabis possession, is released in exchange for... Shh, it's a big secret. Does that mean that our food supply allows the pesticides, but our cannabis side is testing more strictly for things like that?
Right? So listen, I'm a guy who is not big on. I'm not like some libertarian nut job, but I don't love all the regulations. I think we've been smoking weed forever, and I wish it was just.
We talk with Massachusetts #1 cannabis journalist Chris Farone of the Talking Joints Memo about the state of cannabis in the Bay State. All that and state cannabis reports from coast to coast. And we introduce a new European report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV's weekly production of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. I'm Alaina Pinto. Have you downloaded the free PCMTV app? If you want the easiest access to our coverage of the industry, just scan the QR code and it'll take you to the App Store to download the app that not only has the most recent show, but 4 years of documentation of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in the United States. Unfortunately, the thought of that actually happening has taken quite a beating since the Trump administration has set up shop again in our nation's capital. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was confirmed to head up the Health and Human Services Administration, and while many in the industry thought this might be a good thing, RFK Jr. made it clear he is more concerned with the abuse of the plant medicine than its benefits. The one good news item out of Washington, D.C. is the release of a wrongfully detained U.S. citizen in Russia for using medicinal cannabis. Marc Fogel had been in a Russian prison for 3 years. He was a teacher at the Anglo-American School in Moscow for the children of U.S. diplomats. In 2021, Fogel was arrested for carrying 17 grams of cannabis at the airport. The medicine was prescribed for him by a doctor for his severe spinal pain, and he was originally sentenced to 14 years in prison by the same court who sentenced Olympic basketball player Brittany Griner 2 years ago. The man who worked on his release is a Trump envoy or representative for the Middle East. His name is Steve Witkoff, and upon his release, Fogel made an appearance at the White House with President Trump. It was this week. Needless to say, Fogel was grateful for the efforts of the current administration, who has not announced what the U.S. has given up in exchange, but it does seem that this is all part of the U.S.'s role in ending the war in Ukraine. It was a busy week for the president, who nominated a devout cannabis prohibitionist named Terrence Cole to head up the DEA. Upon getting that assignment, Cole made it clear he is no fan of federal reform of cannabis. So all that momentum and talk about moving cannabis to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substances Act has been stopped. And there's even talk about leaving cannabis at Schedule 1, where it's been since 1971, when then President Richard Nixon created the CSA. That is the harshest level for all controlled substances that have no medicinal value. Considering, though, 40 states have decriminalized the plant and have instituted medical programs, and another 24 states have legalized full adult use, the conflict of federal and state laws continues. If you are hoping that the legal states that have vibrant markets are happy, we've got more bad news. This week, there are reports out of Michigan, Ohio, Maine, and Maryland that the governors of those states are looking to increase taxes on the industry that are already teetering on disaster. So in Arizona, they too have a number of bills in their legislature that are not exactly industry friendly. Here's Karen Black.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report. for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Arizona's cannabis industry is at the center of a major antitrust lawsuit. Earth's Healing in Tucson has filed a class action suit against a Chinese vape manufacturer for unspecified damages. The retailer alleges the Shenzhen S'more Technology Company, known for its C-cell vaporizers, has operated an illegal monopoly since 2016. Several of S'more's U.S. distributors are also accused of colluding to control prices and eliminate competition. One of those distributors is Jupiter Research, based in Tempe, Arizona, and Jupiter is a subsidiary of Phoenix's Tilt Holdings. The case could have significant implications for Arizona's cannabis supply chain and pricing structures. As for sales figures, Arizona made it into the billion-dollar cannabis club again in 2024, but just barely. Preliminary total sales of $1.13 billion is down $245 million from 2023. And more declines this year as January sales dropped 20% year over year to $87 million, and the average item price fell 8%. On the legislative front, 2 more cannabis bills were introduced before the deadline, bringing the total number of marijuana measures to 12 this session. A new House bill would require water conservation plans for cannabis, just like every other crop in the state. It also introduces a 30,000 square foot canopy limit per licensee. The other new bill aims to protect tenants from eviction solely for cannabis use. A similar measure made it nowhere last year. 2 other marijuana bills made progress this past week. A measure to allocate $25 million for cannabis research is advancing in the Senate despite funding concerns. And a controversial bill that would restrict cannabis advertising, including ads that appeal to children, passed the House. Its broad definition of marijuana could significantly impact the consumer hemp industry. Opponents hope to refine the bill's language to address this issue while maintaining the advertising restrictions. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Hawaii is trying to change its cannabis laws, and this week, a proposal to increase the amount of cannabis that citizens can possess passed through a Hawaiian Senate panel. That approval increased the possession amount allowed from 3 grams to 15 grams. The civil penalty fine will still be $130 if you are carrying more than 15 grams, just about half an ounce. It is still a long way from becoming law, but at least there is some reform movement happening somewhere in this country. Not much difference in Virginia, where the legislature there continues to move forward with proposals for adult use, and their governor, Glenn Youngkin, continues to say he doesn't care. He will veto any bill his legislature hands him. Needless to say, that does not please our Virginia correspondent, Joe Parsons, who is getting a case of deja vu all over again.
I'm Joe Parsons, and this is the Virginia Cannabis Connection, brought to you by Higher Education's Coffee Talk and 97.5 3WV, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. There is some positive news to report from the Commonwealth this week. Both bills that were introduced this session that would allow for retail cannabis operations to begin have passed their respective chambers and will be headed back to the governor's desk for approval once the General Assembly adjourns later this month. Senate Bill 970, carried by Democratic Senator Aaron Rouse, passed on a strict 21-19 party line vote, with no Republicans voting for it and no Democrats voting against it. House Bill 2485, led by Democratic Delegate Paul Krzyk, cleared the House with limited bipartisan support. Delegate Chris Obenchain and Delegate Will Moorfield were the only 2 Republicans to back the House measure. While it's important to note that getting support from Republicans is a good start, there has been a strong indication that one Republican that can actually enact change, Glenn Youngkin, is likely to veto the bills as he did the year before. Delegate Krzyk said this week, It's great that this bill is getting Republican votes, but the one that matters is the governor, and yet he is unwilling to recognize that it is 2025, not 1975. It's time to work across the aisle together to regulate retail cannabis sales to adults. And lastly, when I left the sentencing of Don Morris last week, she asked if I would give her a hand with Higher Education's podcast, Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville. I was a guest on her show a couple of times and loved how she always put the cannabis community first. I was honored to be asked and, of course, gladly accepted. So, starting next week, join me every Monday at 4:20 p.m. for Coffee Talk, where Seth, Ashley, and myself will bring the best stories from the cannabis industry and talk with the people that are working to make change in the Commonwealth. Well, that's going to do it for this week. From Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
There's quite a bit of movement in the Illinois state legislature regarding the current existing cannabis laws in that state. The Chicago clone guy, Mark Allen, has a full report in the latest there.
What's up, everybody? Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy here. This is Bird reporting from Illinois for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Today we're going to talk about a bunch of House bills that seem to be flooding in this new year, which I'm actually glad to see for once. I know House bills are kind of like opinions. Everybody has them. There's a ton of them, but the ones that have been coming out in Illinois are seeming pretty legit. So let's hopefully see them get some momentum. Let's jump into it. House Bill 2557, simply put, is the Cannabis Delivery Act. Simply put, that's going to allow for dispensaries and legal, organizations to, simply put, deliver cannabis to your doorstep. So step aside DoorDash. Illinois is just going to bring it right to you. The right stuff, the good stuff. All right, on to the next House bill. House Bill 2926. This is a very interesting one. I actually really like this one. This one's going to remove distinctions between medical and non-medical dispensaries in Illinois. Right now in the state, there's simply put two types of dispensaries. There's a medical dispensary and non-medical. The non-medical allows anybody 21 or over to go in and purchase whatever they want at a higher cost. There's also the medical dispensaries where non-medical patients can't go. Only medical patients go, which, simply put, that medical patient has to go through a process of getting a medical card and paying money. So this would combine both of those. Pretty interesting. Let's see how that let's see how that goes in the House. Another one, House Bill 1055. This one's very interesting also, actually more interesting than the last one. This is actually gonna help people with past cannabis convictions get it expunged off their record. Simply put, it's gonna modify the definition of minor cannabis offenses. And how is it gonna do that? It's gonna modify it by increasing the limit of cannabis from 30 grams to 100 grams for expungement. So if people were convicted of possessing cannabis over 30 grams, but less than 100, they can go back, pay a bunch of money, hire a lawyer, go to court, and get it expunged off the record. Sounds like a lot of fun. You would think that maybe the state would just, maybe just expunge it and take it off the record. But either way, it's a step in the right direction. Whew, okay, I'm getting there. On to the next one. House Bill 3498. This one's pretty cool too. Illinois is coming in heavy hitting right now. So House Bill 3498 is pretty cool. So this allows for caregivers to now have a caregiver, simply put, is somebody that can grow cannabis for somebody else that can't grow it. And that caregiver was only allowed to caregive for one person. This new House bill would allow for that caregiver to care for 10 people, which is pretty cool. And on top of that, the whole program itself, it would allow for the expansion of who could be a caregiver. So right now, people with certain types of convictions, criminal convictions, aren't allowed to be caregivers. This House bill would change that and increase the amount of people that are allowed to actually caregive. And the biggest part of this bill would be that the people that are allowed to grow cannabis in Illinois with their medical card, they would be able to grow 12 plants. Previously, right now, as it stands, it's 5 plants you're allowed to grow. So it would go from 5 plants to 12 plants. That's a good amount of plants. I mean, I know people that can pull a pound per plant. So that's a lot of product to get it. But hey, I love it. The more the merrier, and I love seeing that happen. I'm going to finish today's stories on not a House bill story, because it's different. But most states right now are using a system called metric from seed to sale for their cannabis dispensaries. Simply put, that's going to track, from the time that a plant is a seed to the time it gets to a dispensary, and it's called metric. That's what we are going to be transitioning to from BioTrack. One of the new things that this metric system is going to do is going to actually add RFID tags to the plants. That's going to go from the cannabis plant, to pretty much the dispensary. Supposedly, these RFID tracking tags are going to be free of charge to all the people that need to do them. But from what I hear and what I've studied, it seems that the metric is the system that people are used to right now, but it also seems like it's about the only one that really works really good. So hopefully with the expansion of medical and recreational cannabis throughout the United States, we'll see more competition for these types of systems and softwares. But that sums it up for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Mark Allen reporting from Illinois.
That'll do it for the A block, or the first section of Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week. But when we come back, we'll head out to the West Coast to check in on what's going on in California and Oregon. Plus, we'll introduce you to our new European correspondent, Ben Stevens, in England. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
Spain has finally taken a step towards launching its long-promised medical cannabis program, as a draft bill has been sent.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. Cannabis has quickly become a more international market, starting with Canada as the first G7 nation to make it a federally legal commodity and start to export their legal product to Europe and other countries. Germany is still in its first year of legalization, but the laws there continue to evolve. With that in mind, we've found a great addition to our group of reporters and correspondents across the pond in Europe. Ben Stevens is the editor of the Business of Cannabis in Europe and is based in London, England. Here's his first cannabis recap of what is going on in that continent.
I'm Ben Stevens with Business of Cannabis with this week's European Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Spain has finally taken a step towards launching its long-promised medical cannabis program, as a draft bill has been sent to the European Union for approval. This means that a regulated medical cannabis framework could be launched by the summer, but the decree remains controversial, with experts questioning whether it goes far enough to bring any tangible relief for patients. Despite Spain now being one of the key cultivation hubs in Europe, the program will not allow for the prescription of flower. Furthermore, any medical cannabis grown in Spain is strictly for export purposes only, meaning all products in this restrictive scheme will have to be imported. Only medical specialists will be allowed to prescribe, and only hospital pharmacies will be able to dispense, meaning swathes of the estimated 250,000 Spanish patients currently reliant on the black market will still have limited access to legitimate medical cannabis. Crucially, the final draft of this bill removed a clause which effectively opened the door for future expansion, making this conservative plan much harder to improve in the future. Elsewhere, the Czech Republic has brought its highly anticipated adult use bill to Parliament to be debated once again after a long delay. After months of political deadlock, an amendment to the Czech Republic's existing self-cultivation bill has been submitted, forcing a debate on full cannabis regulation. Although the amendment has been officially submitted, no date has been set for the debate. With political divisions and an election looming, the race is on to get this bill finalised before November. The Czech Republic is now the only European country pushing for full adult use legislation, making this a crucial bill for the region. That's it for this week's European Cannabis Report. I'm Ben Stevens from Business of Cannabis, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Cannabis Report. So what we have in Canada this week is Calgary, Alberta is wanting to introduce not only the adult consumption at adult-only events, but also the ability to purchase cannabis at these adult-only events. This will not only put the illicit market on the same level page as the legal market, but it will also put the alcohol as well as the cannabis industry on the same playing field when it comes to being able to purchase and consume within the same establishment. This is something that sounds very interesting, especially due to the fact that we don't have lounges here in Canada. But if they're allowing, or they will to allow the ability to be able to consume and purchase at events, hopefully, that means that we might be moving into a more greener pasture when it comes to lounges. This is your Canadian correspondent, Debi Facey, with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis Report.
Back here in the United States, we turn to the nation's #1 cannabis market, the state of California. There are calls in that state to reinforce the ban on hemp-derived products. And yes, more calls by elected officials to increase taxes on cannabis products in order to make up for revenue losses. Case in point is San Diego. That's where Dina Nagib is from and reports every week.
I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week's California report will focus on San Diego, where a lot of news is happening. The mayor, Todd Gloria, recently announced that he is considering a 2% city cannabis tax increase to help address the budget crisis and declining cannabis revenue. This comes on the heels of Gloria cutting the city's social equity program last year and returning the money granted by the state. With taxes already high, this could cause problems in an already challenging market. Also in the San Diego area, the city of Vista approved licensed cannabis consumption events with sales last year, and the Farmers Cup will be holding their first official licensed event March 15th. This event will be at the Moonlight Amphitheater, and 2,000 attendees are expected. The Farmers Cup have been holding judging and educational events for several years, but this is the first licensed event with consumption and sales of cannabis. Speaking of consumption, San Diego is going to be smoky because Sessions by the Bay, the first consumption lounge in San Diego, is expected to open the end of March. The new lounge will have immersive experiences, stoner food, entertainment, and lots of cannabis. The grand opening is scheduled for March 28th, and this will be a great place for locals and tourists to consume safely with others. That's it for the California Report. I'm Dina Nagib for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now let's turn back to the East Coast and see what's going on in New Jersey. That relatively new market continues to grow, but so does the practice of price gouging. This is especially disturbing to the state's 66,000 medical patients. Despite the relatively small size of that market, they did account for 25% of the over $1 billion of cannabis sold in 2024. Multi-state operators in the Garden State are doing a great job in selling wholesale products into dispensaries for both adult use and medical patients. The state that abuts Jersey is Pennsylvania. And even though that state is still trying to get a favorable bill for adult use to their governor, there are over 450,000 medical patients in the Keystone State. And now prices for a gram there have fallen to $3, while in New Jersey, medical patients are paying an average of $300 a month for their medicine, and the cost per gram in the Garden State is between $10 and $25 per gram. Needless to say, there are plenty of people going over state lines to get the best deals they can on either adult use in New Jersey or medical sales in Pennsylvania. And with more from New Jersey, here's Jill Goldsberry.
I'm Jill Goldsberry here with the Garden State Report for Cannabis for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and here's what's happening in the Garden State of New Jersey. New legislation is being introduced that may loosen rules on recreational cannabis sales, actually. So that is the news. The new legislation is being introduced by State Senate President Nicholas Scutari, and it would allow for cannabis facilities to literally bypass municipality approval to begin recreational sales. Now, why that's a big deal? 1/3 of our state is allowed to have recreational and medicinal cannabis sales, while the rest of New Jersey completely prohibits it in any way whatsoever. This would allow for cannabis facilities to be able to bypass municipality approval and actually open up in various municipalities that are not open now. So there's expected pushback on this, and we will definitely keep you posted on what's happening with that. In other news, as Black History Month continues, a new partnership has arisen between New Jersey's #1 edible brand, Butter Cake, and a sweet place in the town of Montclair called She Imagined Sweets. There's a new product on the market by Butter Cake. It's called the Indulgence Jar, the Double Indulgence Jar. And that, oh my God, it sounds amazing. It is something that, if you've ever wanted to share these brownies with your friends who don't infuse, this is the perfect item because it is creamy cheesecake with a delectable chocolate brownie from Butter Cake. And I'm sure it's amazing. I can't wait to try it myself. But that is available only for a limited time, and you could find them only at She Imagined Sweets in Montclair, New Jersey, if you know, you know. And reach out to either one of them to find out how long this partnership will be going on, because you definitely don't want to miss out on it. I'm Jill Goldsberry with Cannabis Coast to Coast News, the Garden State Edition. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
One of the newest adult use legal states in the country is Minnesota. That state has yet to open any dispensaries, and now it looks like the tribal nations in that state may be the first to take advantage of the new legal cannabis landscape. Governor Tim Walz is in negotiations with 11 of the 12 tribes in his state who will be given the rights to open off-reservation stores, manufacturing facilities, and cultivation. This was part of the 2023 law that legalized cannabis in Minnesota, a state with a history of quite a few tribal nations. With more on the already engaged world of our friends in the indigenous community, here's Tina Tasaka in Nevada.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Planet 13 Holdings has announced a new partnership to co-brand, package, and produce premium cannabis products for boxing champion Mike Tyson, wrestling icon Ric Flair, and multi-platinum artist Future. We are excited to continue to expand our celebrity-based universe, bringing the biggest names in entertainment and sports to life through top-tier cannabis products, said Lee Frazier, Chief Administrative Officer of Planet 13. On February 7th, 2025, the Las Vegas Sun reported on a long article about Nevada lawmakers pushing for solutions to combat illegal marijuana sales in the state. Based on this, one of the lawmakers is drafting the following. Assembly member Max Carter II is drafting a bill to allow marijuana kiosks in 13 non-gaming hotels on the Las Vegas Strip, aiming to steer tourists away from illegal sources. These kiosks would provide a secure pickup location for legal, tested, and taxed cannabis, reducing the risk of unsafe products. The plan also minimizes cash on site to deter robberies and enhance safety. This proposal seeks a balance between gaming and cannabis industries while ensuring controlled operations. We will continue to follow this legislation and report on any updates. And now, fresh off the Champ Show, I gotta say, I was blown away by this show, and in many aspects, some of the highlights for me included Mike Tyson. He continues to expand his empire, and now he has an eye drop. They are called Mike Drops. Snoop was there, and he fired up the crowd. Blunts and iconic, incredible music in his SWED booth. Smoke weed every day. I think that more than 50% of the booths had a hemp D9 bevy. And for the first time ever, live tattoos were on the floor with Sheldon Cooper. URB, Herb, they had liftoff. Their booth emulated an airline cabin with flight attendants, savvy product placement, and a Mile High Club. All in all, Champs was just amazing, and July is around the corner, so I will return. That's it for the Nevada highlights and Tribal Nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There are more issues in Oregon cannabis besides an overabundance of product and crashing prices. There is a dispute now over the growth of organized labor in that state. So here's Marianne Kershaji with more.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with the Oregon Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Two legal stories out of Oregon this week. The first is that a customer has filed suit against retailer Highway 99 Cannabis Co. and vape manufacturer Quantum Alchemy. According to the lawsuit, the plaintiff was using a vape pen while naked in his bathroom when it exploded, causing injuries and a small fire. He is suing for $223,000. Quantum Alchemy was also in the news 2 years ago for a pesticide recall. Next, a lawsuit has been filed to halt enforcement of Measure 119. The lawsuit claims that the federal National Labor Relations Act preempts this state measure. According to the filed plaintiff statement, Measure 119 denies employees the right to decide for themselves whether or not to join a union and is inconsistent with the NLRA, which provides employees with the right not to engage in any union activity. If enforced, Measure 119 could deny licenses to those cannabis businesses that fail to follow the law and would irreparably harm those businesses and their employers. Rumor has it that it will be in front of a judge shortly, so we shall see how this lawsuit unfolds. That's the Oregon Cannabis Report. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the B Block, but don't go away. PCMTV founder Jimmy Young has an exclusive interview with Chris Farone from the Talking Joints Memo and one of the most respected local cannabis journalists in the Bay State. They will talk about a handful of lawsuits, a very public dispute between the state treasurer and the former chair of the Cannabis Control Commission, and lab shopping lawsuits. All that and more coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't go away.
Yes, I mean, Jimmy, Massachusetts has some of the most unbelievably strict regulation, especially for things like residual solvents for vapes and things like that. So people can really be rest assured. At the same time, some of the restrictions it's not just that they're strict, they're really unreasonable and not well done, according to experts.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. The guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maize pipe is amazing. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weejits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the C Block, our final section of our weekly news show. I'm Alaina Pinto. If you haven't downloaded our free PCMTV app, you should, since it's the easiest way to keep up with the news of the industry every week. You can use the QR code on the screen to take you right to the App Store or Google Play. Next up in our state reports is New York State, where that state's Office of Cannabis Management has created a guide to banking and cannabis-friendly credit unions for the industry. It's called the Cannabis Banking Directory, and the idea was to increase access to financial services that are cannabis-friendly. Coming off the saga of the debanking hearing from last week, it's certainly a step forward that some financial institutions are softening their approach to cannabis. However, there are only 10 banks listed in the entire state of New York in this guide. Going out on a limb here, but I bet there are more than that in the state. In fact, in 2023, the total was over 1,900 banks and credit unions. And get this, there are over 500 financial institutions in New York City alone. So kind of puts it in perspective for you, the challenges the industry continues to have with banking and the need for that safer banking reform that was once considered low-hanging fruit for our elected officials who continue to make it as difficult as possible for this industry to survive. Next up, it's Kimmie Cannabis in Oklahoma, where 2 of their Republican senators have introduced legislation that would ban cannabis businesses from a tax break on the 280E clause, even if the plant medicine gets moved from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Lankford issued a press release this week stating his prohibitionist spin on why he is doing this. His quote was, "Businesses who sell federal illegal drugs, including marijuana businesses, shouldn't get federal tax breaks. This bill clarifies federal tax law to make sure a federally illegal product does not have a federally legal tax deduction." End of that quote. Despite this kind of representation, Oklahoma has a vibrant medical program, but it is still illegal for adults to use cannabis without a medical card. Here's Kimmie Cannabis.
I am Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In recent legislative developments, Oklahoma House Bill 1750, which sought to prohibit pregnant women from using medical marijuana, is officially dead after facing heavy pushback from the public. The bill, introduced by Representative Anthony Moore, aimed to criminalize cannabis use during pregnancy, even for those with a valid medical marijuana license. Critics argued it could discourage women from seeking prenatal care and unfairly target vulnerable communities. The bill's failure highlights the tension between medical autonomy and legislative overreach in Oklahoma's evolving cannabis laws. Meanwhile, U.S. Senator James Lankford has made headlines by doubling down on his opposition to easing financial burdens on cannabis businesses. He recently stated that he does not support allowing cannabis businesses to claim tax deductions, emphasizing that illegal drug sellers should not benefit from federal tax breaks. But here's the reality. Cannabis businesses already cannot claim standard tax deductions. They file under Section 280E, a federal tax code that prohibits deductions for businesses trafficking Schedule 1 substances, including cannabis. Lankford's comments confirm there's no intention to change that, even as talks around federal rescheduling continue. A reminder that financial relief for Oklahoma's cannabis businesses is nowhere in sight. That's it for this week's Oklahoma Cannabis Update. I'm Kimmie Cannabis with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
Now in its third year of adult use sales, the state of Missouri continues to be one of the United States' most stable businesses. However, it's not without some growing pains, as Brandon Jones explains in his Missouri Cannabis Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, live from the Tree Lounge. And yes, I'm here with the founder, owner, and the guy that runs the day-to-day operations, oversees pretty much everything, my buddy, Hollis Tatum. Thanks, man, for joining me.
How you doing? How you doing? Hollis, Boneyard Munchies. Not actually the owner, but the owner of Boneyard Munchies. It's the Tree Room KC. This is where we at, 1820 McGee, Kansas City, Missouri. You know, come chill, hang out, catch a new vibe with us.
And if you don't know the Kansas City area, 18th and 20 McGee basically is downtown Kansas City. You can walk to tons of different restaurants, lots of places around here. If you want to go check out the city, you're not too far from T-Mobile and Power and Light. So we're in the heart of Kansas City. This isn't some place on the outskirts where you have to go hide and find like hidden on GPS to get to. This is right in the heart of Kansas City where people can come. Like we had a Valentine's Day event, Super Bowl watch party. There's a birthday party pass here.
Just about a little mix of any and everything that you could think of. We're trying to make a new home base for the floats, you know what I'm saying? So we have birthdays, holidays, special events, game days, just a little mix of everything, really.
And we have lots of the licensed facilities that are looking places to, you know, have for their staff to be able to kind of relax and have parties and do like things like that. Like Timeless was here last night, right?
Yes, sir. The Timeless event, a couple of corporates that come out, they have their private events, agent card only. You know, we support the business because they support us.
And then here you have pool tables, games.
Yep, a little mix of everything. Arcade games, pool tables, foosball, console gaming, and just about once you pay to get in, everything is free after that.
Like live DJs come in here and perform. So you got different artists from Kansas City that come out here. Like tonight, there's local artists performing.
We have Bandocious, K-Town, YGKC, the three-headed monster group, one of the good locals that's out here doing good music and business.
Yeah, so not only are we promoting the safe use of medical cannabis, a place where you can consume, where you know you're going to be amongst friends and other people that believe in the same kind of things and use this as medicine, but you can enjoy lots of games, local music, and it's a place for the artists to feel safe, to know that they can consume as well when they're performing instead of having to have the issues of dealing with all the venues as well. So the artists, I'm sure, love to perform here too.
Yes, and that's one of the biggest things that we push off is making sure that everyone feels safe, you're of age, and no one is doing more than what's needed. So
how did Boneyard Munchies and you kind of get started in the industry?
Really, it started off as a good little hobby until we noticed the actual effects that it was having on certain people. It's hard to come around and how it benefited the body more. So we added the sweets and fun together with the medical, and now we're here.
Yeah, right here at the Tree Lounge, Kansas City. So like I said, there are lounges here, and how it works is you have to have an agent ID card or play a daily membership.
Yes.
To get any, obviously you have to be of age and ID. And there are, I know of at least 4 lounges, but this is the only one in Kansas City that I really know that's doing it kind of like this. I know there's another event that's going to start to have music around here, but not a daily membership lounge, kind of like we have consumption here.
Yeah.
I know in Rolla, there's Debi's. In St. Louis, the 314 lounge or the office. And then Brennan England has, what is that one called? Oh, man, he's going to kill me. But Brennan England also has another great spot in St. Louis for cannabis consumption lounges here. So I'm Brandon Jones here with Hollis Tatum for B Green Distribution, the Missouri Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks a lot. Stay medicated and educated. Have a great week.
Next up, it's our weekly check-in on the publicly traded stocks in the cannabis industry with Doug Miller, who is always high on Wall Street.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Marijuana business Chicago Atlantic BDC closed a $100 million secured revolving credit line led by a Federal Deposit Insurance Corp. With no current debt outstanding, the credit facility provides us with significant liquidity and flexibility to grow the company's portfolio as we seek to capitalize on the robust lending opportunities in the originations pipeline. Scott Gordon, Chicago Atlantic's BDC's executive chair and co-chief investment officer, said in a statement. If you remember, this specialty lender took the name Chicago Atlantic BDC back in October when Silver Spike Investment Corp closed on a portfolio of loans. So let's see how the stock chart looks. It trades under the stock ticker LIEN. It is trading around $12.23, and it's been running up. So watch for any pullback, but it is bullish and it looks good. So keep your eye on this one. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
Hi, I'm Chjristina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Last week I mentioned Governor DeWine and the proposed changes he was wanting to make, and in his new budget he's suggesting that we increase the tax on adult use cannabis and then turn around and use that money to build jails and police training instead of using it for the various community funds. This as Ohio sales exceed over $319 million. But in other good news, this last weekend at a Cincinnati suburban farmers market, they had 30 vendors set up and you're allowed to buy seeds, immature plants, and clones. Hope to see more of that to come. Thank you. I'm Chjristina Brisson with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
In Willow Creek, Rory, renowned for birdwatching, embraced nature's elegance. Preparing for his woodland sojourn, he used grape-focused THC mist from Yellow Labs. Each spritz honed his senses, capturing avian beauty. Immersed in the forest symphony, Rory's lens froze vibrant moments. Emerging at twilight, gratitude filled him for the mist's clarity. Recalling, find Yellow Labs near you. Rory ordered more of his mist from
Next up, the state of cannabis in the Bay State of Massachusetts. Chris Farone is one of the most respected journalists in this state. His weekly Talking Joints Memo is always filled with up-to-date information, and Chris's passion for the cause does not interfere with his writing. This week, PCMTV founder Jimmy Young talks with Chris about the multiple lawsuits that have been filed by the industry, including a testing lab suing other testing labs, and the ongoing squabble between the state treasurer, Deborah Goldberg, and former commission chair, Shannon O'Brien, the ongoing developments of a new class of licenses allowing some kind of social consumption, and more. All of this is part of Chris's and Jimmy's discussion. Here is just an excerpt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm PCMTV founder Jimmy Young. So happy to be joined by a friend from the Massachusetts area. His name is Chris Farone. He puts out a newsletter every week called the Talking Joints Memo. And if you have not subscribed, I urge you to do it because this guy covers cannabis fairly. Is that fair? Are you happy with that? Because I actually believe that, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe in objectivity. I just believe in being thorough, real frankly. You know, I try. You know, it's every decision we make is subjective. I try to make the subjective decision to include a lot of information.
Right, and you're human, so that that's a good thing. Last time I checked, you're human, right? Anyway.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So this week, I love the lead lawsuits everywhere, Massachusetts. This is one of the reasons why when people ask me what should I invest in the cannabis space, I go a good law firm because in either side, right? Absolutely. Here's the one that intrigues me the most: the two fields that were adjacent to each other, right? And one had pesticides in it, and those pesticides ended up moving over onto the cannabis crop, and the cannabis crop got flagged, right? Isn't that right? That's the gist.
That's right. And, the lawsuit is, when we write about lawsuits and when we speak about them on podcasts, we're very careful, of course, and innocent until it's not guilty. It's civil court, but, innocent until proven not innocent. At the same time, this lawsuit filed by a Westfield, Massachusetts grower, not quite all the way in the western part of the state, but, I think it's in the Pioneer Valley. I know people from out there will correct me on the specs, but nevertheless, it's a small grow that has not put product to market in a couple of years, is suing its neighbor. It's a strawberry farm, Norse Farms, and there's a lot of documentation that comes with this lawsuit. And the documentation basically shows that I don't know what the culpability is, but to the extent that it happened, yes. I mean, so there are certain pesticides, and this that can be used in a strawberry grow that cannot be found in your tests, your residual or your testing of your cannabis crop in Massachusetts. Yeah. And it's caused them apparently, allegedly $17 million in damages. They're not going to be able to put a crop out this year. They're stuck with all this fresh frozen. It's a disaster, and it really goes to show the bottom line here is that outdoor growers, which in my opinion, we should be encouraging outdoor grows. Hey, I'm wearing a number 9 sunflower. Coastal Cultivars, they are an advertiser of ours, but they're also one of my favorite spots. They're growing under the sun. Nothing against indoor grows. My point is, life is made pretty difficult for the outdoor grows. As far as there are some pesticides, natural pesticides, not DDT, but natural pesticides that you're allowed to use in one regard, but then they can't be part of your testing afterwards. You'll have to get someone on a lot smarter than me to really break that down. But I know we only have short time here anyway. So the point is, this is only, this is adding another layer. It appears to be an unprecedented lawsuit, at least in Massachusetts, of the contamination from the neighboring non-cannabis crop. So we'll see what happens. And you just your heart just breaks for a business like this that, hasn't been able to put product to market.
Absolutely. And now, does it beg the question, does that mean that our food supply allows the pesticides, but our cannabis side is testing more strictly for things like that?
So listen, I'm a guy who is not big on, I'm not like some libertarian nut job, but I don't love all the regulations. I think we've been smoking weed forever, and I wish it was just right. But living in the world that we do live in, yes. I mean, Jimmy, Massachusetts has some of the most unbelievably strict regulations, especially for things like residual solvents for vapes and things like that. So people can really be rest assured. At the same time, some of the restrictions it's not just that they're strict, they're really unreasonable and not well done, according to experts. And that's where there are a lot of problems that are leading to some of the other stuff I'm sure we'll talk about today. But this lawsuit really just shows that
lab shopping. Yeah, lab shopping is a problem, and it's because these restrictions. This is a residual effect of these restrictions, because
Well, lab shopping. It's also related to testing, in that and lab shopping is related to testing standards. Now, the testing standards on pesticides, and on some of the contaminants, yes, that there's basically, if we're going to separate testing into 2 categories, there's testing for all the bad stuff, and then there's testing for potency. Now, this other lawsuit we're talking about, the Framingham-based MCR Labs, which also has facilities in other states, is suing 8 other ITLs, independent testing labs, saying that they cheat on their tests for all of these other things, for potency and for things like heavy metals and everything. Why do they do this? Allegedly, and well, if they were to do it, the reason is because people want, it makes their value of their crop higher.
Willing to pay for better results, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically paying for better results, but it's not just better. On the potency side, certainly it's better results. On the contamination side, and on the total yeast and mold side, in some cases it is to pass things that should not be passed. And we're not going to get into names necessarily of brands, but this whole past week has been an absolute disaster in Massachusetts cannabis, with some of the parties named in the lawsuit also having products recalled by the state telling Talking Joints Memo that they were not reacting to this lawsuit. So what we're seeing now is basically the culmination of a lot of mess that people who know this stuff have predicted. I'm just a reporter. I'm not trying. I'm a reporter. I've written it, but I've written other people saying it. It's not me saying it. I'm a dummy. They had to burn the school down to get me out of chemistry class. I am relying on the experts here. And when you read, if you look at a lot of this data, I don't know if the defendants in this case are to blame. I'm just saying that clearly things are out of whack. The standards are not. They really don't appear to be very thorough standards, and this is where it's led to a bunch of lawsuits in an industry that's already hurting.
The entirety of that interview will be available on our website at procannabismedia.com and on our PCMTV app, of course. That'll do it for this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Consume it responsibly. We'll see you next week.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Be Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
It's Debi Facey with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCMTV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCMTV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.